So I want to thank people for joining us today. We've gotten an outstanding number of people coming in. We're really pleased to see such a broad interest in today. Today's topic is obviously pretty controversial and should be a interesting time today. I'll be giving a presentation, and I'd like to break for questions every so often if we can. We'll see how the time goes. We're booked for 60 minutes, but I've got 90 minutes available, so that if we need to go beyond the 60, that should be possible. And this will be fully recorded if all the equipment works correctly, so that anybody who can't stay with the full 60 to 90 minutes, we can have a tape available that will be there free of charge. Do let your friends and family know about this recording if you enjoy it, and we want as broad a free viewing experience as possible. So we'll want to get this out as we can. So let's dive right in with that. This is our disclaimer that we've done for every talk that includes this topic, which is we are not formally diagnosing anybody with any mental health disorder, although some people may accuse us of such as we go along today. But we're not, and we're not violating the Goldwater rule, which we'll probably talk about some a little bit later. We are recording today's talk. I've already told you that, but just to remind you, we are recording the talks. We hope to have a lot of dialogue interaction, and that will be via microphone primarily, although you can still send in questions. Ryan Deegan is our host today in the background, and if we get many email questions, he may be able to jump in with those. But preferable is to use your microphone. So we'll practice that in just a moment. But if you click on the raise your hand button, that will allow us to know who wants their microphone open, and when we get to those sections, we'll have that available. But that does mean that if you don't want your voice recorded, then don't press the button and don't unmute your microphone. The talk today is based on our book that many of you probably know about, called A Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of President Trump. This is the revised edition. In fact, I probably ought to have one here. The revised, you'll know it's revised because it says revised edition and has President Trump instead of Donald Trump. Of course, since Donald Trump became President Trump, that has changed things significantly, and thus we added a few chapters to it, and we rewrote certain sections to reflect that now he's president. I want to leave this slide up for a moment or two just to give people a sense of the contributors. We had 18 to 20 people contribute, and we really are proud of the caliber of people that did so. While we're on this slide, I want to test our raise your hand function. So I'm just going to take 60 seconds or so. Go ahead and click your raise your hand button, and I will unclick them in a moment. But anybody that cares to, just click the raise your hand. A bunch of you are clicking. Excellent. I'm going to take the first 5 and just unmute you if possible, and just say hi. You don't need to say much more unless you want to, but there's a few people that have been invited to unmute. Anybody there? Can you say hi?
Hi.
Excellent. There we go. So that's how simple it will be. When we get to the question and answer phrase, we will ask you to raise your hand. I will unclick the mute button to your microphones. I'm not the NSA. I can't enter your computer. But it will, I believe, invite you to unmute your own computer, and you can join us. We'll thus probably have 20 to 30 people unmuted simultaneous, so I do ask that you be respectful to those that are on there with you. But we'll be planning to unmute some microphones a few times through the broadcast with that. Okay, let me talk that. All right. This slide is outdated. We've tripled probably the number of media that have contacted us with that. But there's about 20 or so interviews now that we've done on this topic. You can imagine it's been a sort of hot topic. anywhere from the New York Times to Bill Moyers, to lots of radio and newspaper. On our website, if you go to Trump-narcissism.com and click on the media tab, you can listen to most of those interviews if you care to later on. Some are long, an hour long, others are 10 minutes. And there's a press kit that you can download that has the fullest list of all the interviews. But this has been kind of hot topic for a while now. I thought I should introduce myself, which I haven't done at all yet, but there's my name. I'm Steve Buser. And just to give you a very quick background of who I am, I went to Michigan State undergraduate, Duke for medical school, started off in pediatrics, but then later changed to psychiatry, was 12 years in the military. In 2008, co-founded the Asheville Jung Center, which is the platform we're using today. Then in 2013, took over as publisher of Chiron Publications and have been in private practice psychiatry since 1997. This was our first book, at least the first book that I co-wrote, and I bring this up just because it is related. We wrote the book on DSM-5, not the main book, but a book about the book. DSM-5 is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual version 5, and this is the diagnostic coding for psychiatrists, psychologists, social workers. So when we see a patient or a client and we're diagnosing in order to get paid by health insurance, you need a certain code, and we did a primer, in essence, on the DSM-5 coding. It's been our most popular book within the 190 titles that we have with Chiron, at least for the last few years. But I mention that because literally the book is also about narcissistic personality disorder, so we do have some expertise in the diagnostic nomenclature in there. Chiron Publication is a publishing company began by Nathan Schwartz-Salant and Murray Stein. And about 5 years ago or so, maybe 4 years, they asked us to take over the publishing company. The company is thus 35 years old, has 190 titles. There's the website. And this book, Clear and Present Danger, is a Chiron publication. So if you want to learn more about the book, if you go to Chiron, you can find it. Of course, it's on Amazon as well. But we have many other books, again, 190 titles, so we have quite a few. Most are on Jungian psychology. Obviously, the DSM-5 isn't, but the majority of the other books are. A couple key questions I wanted to put up on the slides are some of the first two topics we'll be looking at today. One is arrogant or narcissist, and confident man or con man. And then we'll go into a few other areas as well. If you have time today, these are the 6 areas we'd like to look at. First 2 we just mentioned. We've got a concept we're calling post-Trump-matic stress disorder. We're going to be talking some about a shadow presidency, about the Trump complex, and then confronting our own narcissism. And hopefully, at the end of each of these 5 or 6 sessions, we'll open up the microphones and have some dialogue with that, time permitting. So section number 1 is arrogant or narcissist. And of course, that's in the eye of the beholder, but it's a key question and was one of the main questions that precipitated the book being produced. The question that we are asking with that is, does President Trump suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, DSM-5 code F60.81, or other mental illness? There have been a number of accusations of diagnoses, supposedly, of Donald Trump having other disorders. And along with that, is it fair to diagnose him in light of the Goldwater rule, which we may have a chance to talk about today? I want to talk a little bit about inner versus outer characteristics of narcissistic personality disorder. This is the summary of the diagnosis of NPD, narcissistic personality disorder. This is right from our book, the DSM-5 book, which is a summary of the larger DSM-5 book. And primarily, there's a list of 5 out of 9 symptoms that you need to qualify for the disorder. Of course, it isn't that simple. It takes a trained mental health professional and or psychological testing to be quite in depth to fully diagnose somebody. But the summary is that this tic-tac-toe board that you see on the screen are the 9 criterion. And basically, if you have 5 out of the 9, then you may qualify for narcissistic personality disorder. And those 9 include grandiosity, the need for admiration, lacking empathy towards others, feeling entitled, feeling envious of others or assuming others are envious of you, exploiting others, seeing yourself as special, having fantasies of unlimited success or power, or appearing arrogant. And people will look at President Trump or other people in the national limelight, and it's easy to assume as much. We'll get the poll question in just a moment. Get ready for that, but not quite yet. The piece I want to add with this is most of these, not all, but many of these characteristics are interior characteristics. Do they feel entitled? Do they see themselves as special? And that goes into the controversy of can you diagnose from afar. The first talk we did a number of months ago, in much more detail, we chose 10 quotes from President Trump, then candidate Trump, and went through each quote looking at some of these characteristics. But I don't think we want to repeat that this time. We can if we run out of things to talk about, which I highly doubt. But this is the question: does President Trump or others display these characteristics? So, Ryan, go ahead and put up the poll at this time. The poll is: do I see President Trump as confident, arrogant, a narcissist, or unsure, or none of the above? You'll have about a minute, maybe 2, to do that. So at this point, I'm going to open up some microphones for questions, comments, thoughts. So go back to that clicking your hand. So if your hand is already raised and you didn't mean it to be, unraise it. And if you'd like to be able to comment or add a question, go ahead and click that piece. And the first few that I see, I'll go ahead and pop open the microphones. So then I'll read off the names, at least first name. So Annie, got yours, Barbara, Betsy Adams. Anybody whose microphone is open, feel free to start your question. And others, I'll be clicking there. Anybody there online that has a thought or question, state your name, where you're from, and your thought or question. Anybody who's open, go ahead. I just heard somebody say something. Okay. So,
yep, that was me. Yep. Just wondering, with the most recent incidents of President Trump ordering a missile strike on Syria, as apparently or supposedly as a result of his witnessing the deaths of children from the chemical gas, this is a little mystifying that he would react so strongly. Doesn't exactly fall into the narcissist response, but it could. I mean, I could find a way to fit it in those parameters. So I'm just wondering if guys are processing any of these most very recent.
Yeah, and tell me your name and where are you from?
Betsy Adams, Spartanburg, South Carolina.
Okay, excellent. So a neighbor, Spartanburg, right there.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, so a couple thoughts I have. I'll be interested to hear yours and other people that may have some comments. That, first of all, if we haven't determined does he or does he not have narcissistic personality disorder, but either way, that certainly wouldn't define all characteristics of him. Yeah, there were certainly other behaviors and characteristics that may be other aspects of him. The missile strike, a skeptic would say that's a tempting action to take, when you're being, and your administration is being investigated for ties to the Russians and being too soft in that area to attack an ally of Russia and destroy a base. Certainly shifted the question, the dialogue quite a bit. That would get to the con man section that we'll be talking about soon, where you would worry less about human life and more about your image and are you getting caught with something or not. But it certainly is in line with somebody who who take strong action that may not think through that action in a way that the rest of us might do so with that.
Okay.
Betsy, do you have other thoughts with that?
No, that's right on. I mean, it occurred to me that, you know, there was some spin on his decision to use the missiles. And as you said, certainly it has detracted attention from the investigation in Congress into the Russian meddling and so on and so forth. So, yep.
Yeah, I wonder about that. Do we have the results up, Ryan? Did we share that yet?
Yes, we do. We've got the results up right now.
Okay. It's not showing on my screen.
I've got them up, and from what I can see, it's confident is 2%, arrogant is 19%, and narcissism is 77%, with unsure or none of the above at 3%.
Well, there you go. So far of this sampling, which of course is a little bit skewed, I suspect. The majority narcissism is the one that pops up. Is everybody else, somebody whose microphone is open, can you see the results of that poll too? You can, yes?
I've just closed them.
Okay, but you could in the past. For some reason,
correct.
I guess I'm sharing my screen, so I didn't see that. This microphone says second, but anybody else whose microphone is open want to have any questions or comments?
Hello, I've just typed in a couple of questions into the questions box.
Okay. It's hard for me to monitor both simultaneous. Do you want to speak it, or do you want Ryan to read it off?
Well, I guess my question is, in the matter of the gas attack, we've heard a lot of information that Trump was significantly influenced by Jared Kushner and Ivanka on this issue. How does that modify your diagnosis, the fact that there's a third party could be involved here?
I'm not sure it would modify the diagnosis. And remember, back to the disclaimer, I have not officially diagnosed Donald Trump with narcissistic personality disorder. I think what you're saying, how does that affect our concerns of what a syndrome could be going on to somebody like President Trump? It kind of goes back to that earlier comment of, just because he may or may not suffer from narcissistic personality disorder, wouldn't preclude who we would use as an advisor, with that. One thing I would say with somebody that is narcissistic, suffers from narcissistic personality disorder, it is very common to surround yourself with yes people, people that believe very much as you believe, or perhaps more accurately said, who would be very reluctant to confront or oppose a view out there. That part would be highly concerning, because if you're president of the United States, you would hope that you would be soliciting feedback when you're doing something wrong or something that somebody disagrees with. You would hope your advisors would be giving you the alternative view. A strong narcissist, say a CEO at a company who's got severe narcissism, often surrounds him or herself with yes people who aren't going to confront behavior that's problematic, and that's where you sometimes see companies falling off the deep end because everybody was afraid to confront the narcissistic CEO. I'm not saying that's what's happening with his children, but you do get a sense of him surrounding himself with sort of similar folks, similar in the sense of family members or CEOs of other companies or other business people. There's a bit of a homogeneousness surrounding President Trump, which if he does have NPD, which again that's really an opinion question. That's why we made an opinion poll. But if he does, it would make sense that he would surround himself by like-minded people, and perhaps even like-minded. Okay, next section, I want to talk a little bit about, let me just say this first. We sort of already just said it, but with the question of does he have narcissistic personality disorder or not, again, that ends up being more of an opinion. So unless we can personally evaluate President Trump face-to-face as a psychiatrist in an evaluation and do psychological testing, and he signs a release of information which if he won't release his taxes, he sure as heck will not release a psychological evaluation. Unless we can do those things, we're limited with an absolute diagnosis of NPD. But we still need to ask, what is the evidence of it? And for each of the readers of the book or viewers of the seminar, do we believe that he displays narcissism? And if so, do we see it as impairing? And how would we respond as citizens? That's the real question. If we're not able to 100% diagnose formally, what's the implications if we're concerned as citizens about it? Second section is confident man or confidence man, which shortens into con man. This is a new chapter of the book. For those of you who have read the first chapter, Clear and Present Danger, Narcissism in the Era of Donald Trump, we added in the revised edition a chapter on confident man or con man written by Richard Smoot, who's a psychologist here in Asheville as well. And the question is President Trump a confident man, a man who is just a very confident individual, or is he a confidence man, which is a term that refers to a con man? Many of you probably remember Senator Marco Rubio calling Donald Trump a con artist on CBS This Morning in February of 2016, obviously prior to the election and during the primaries. Confidence man being defined as someone who manipulates deceptively for personal gain, usually financial. And again, this is a book chapter by Dr. Smoot. Samuel Thompson, who lived in the early to mid 1800s, was the original con man. He used to do confidence games, which involved asking passerbys in city streets to have confidence in him by giving him their money or watches. And believe it or not, this was successful. Many people had confidence in him, gave them their money or watches, and of course he left quickly after that with their belongings. He was indeed arrested in 1849, and the New York Herald coined the term confidence man to depict a man who swindles others out of their valuables by fairly simply asking them to believe in him, to have confidence in them. That was later shortened to con man, and we've seen subsequent images of the con man since. Dr. Smoot in his chapter spends a fair amount of time looking at the psychological characteristics of the con man, both historically and over the years, and then looks at political con with that. So part of that comes forth when people will say, well, come on now, all politicians lie. Every politician out there lies to some degree. And most would agree with that most politicians indeed lie and are deceitful. The difference is usually the politician is lying to win the election and advance their political agenda, be that a conservative, liberal, something in between. A con man lies for personal gain or for financial gain. The media confronts the lies, that's their job. The media fact checkers confront the deceit, and the politician will usually modify, correct, or apologize for their inaccurate comments. That's the game, that's the way the game works. And most of us who have watched really any politically oriented television over the last 10, 20 years have heard the fact checkers pop up, and they'll find inaccurate or even lies that politicians say. They'll be confronted, and the politician will usually apologize and say, well, no, what I meant to say was such and such. The difference that many of us have seen in this presidency is that when President Trump is confronted by clearly inaccurate statements, he will often double down, meaning he'll assert the inaccurate point even more strongly, or even attack the person pointing out the error, which is a bullying response. Or we'll turn to fear of terrorism, fear of radical Islam, fear of the immigrants, etc. The con man looks for blind faith, stirring strong emotions, particularly fear of the menacing other. Appears key in achieving the trust. Only I can protect you. Trust me, believe me, you will love it. It will be great. Speeches often focus on the dangerous immigrant or the radical Muslim, as particularly in the campaign trail, but even now, President Trump still often focuses on these pieces. Belief in the con man is essential. Blind allegiance is key. Just trust me. I have a plan to defeat ISIS. I won't tell you what that plan is, but just trust me. It's there and you're going to love it. Okay, so next poll question is, do I see President Trump as a confident man or a confidence man, con man, or none of the above? Poll should be open. And I'm going to try to unmute the microphones again. I apologize that I botched it that last time. But go ahead and raise your hand. Click the raise your hand button, and I promise I will click on the unmute piece now. And I'll read off the first name as I unmute. Annie, oops, you're self-muted, so I can unmute you. Barbara, self-muted as well. Some of you are self-muted, which I should be offering right now a screen to open up. Betsy, both Betsy's have been unmuted. So anybody who's unmuted so far, feel free to ask a question. Next time I'll start with the Z's. I apologize if you're low on the alphabet. Any thoughts or questions out there?
Yeah, I've got one.
Shoot. Hey, give me your name and where you're at.
This is Ed Hester. I'm over in Raleigh.
Okay. Hello, Ed.
I've been following your past webinars with great interest. This is a wonderful opportunity to review this, and I really appreciate your offering that to the community, Steve.
Absolutely. Yeah, so glad you joined.
Every confidence man needs a mark, and what really interests me and confuses me is what is the complement of a confidence man? What is the profile of a person that will give such absolute loyalty and belief that they give their loyalty to the person and not to the party or not to the philosophy or not to the ideology or even not to the political system that everyone relies upon for good answers and good responses?
Excellent question. Okay. Yeah, what is the mark and why? That's actually a prelude to what we're calling the Trump complex, which is a different chapter within the book, of a unconscious pull towards a magnetic figure, such as Donald Trump. One of our theories is there is a profound unconscious movement within the United States and even the world, when you look at some of the other Brexit and other happenings across the globe, but an unconscious force or energy complex that is pulling people towards a figure, such as Donald Trump. So one of our theories is that is this Trump complex, which I'll talk about a fair amount more in a little bit, that pulls people in, making them vulnerable, looking for a simplistic answer, a strong man, somebody who's got this strength exuding, who, if I just let Trump fix it, it will all be good again. He'll make America great again. I think there's a blind allegiance that's unconsciously motivating people towards a blind faith within that. Do you have other thoughts about that?
Well, it appears to me that a lot of the folks that supported him and that voted for him, in fact, are feeling very vulnerable and are in the exact position not to benefit from the kind of policies that he's.
Isn't it ironic that his base of support does indeed seem to be the ones that are most adversely affected, by his policies, with that, which is unbelievable, but yet also underpins that it's probably not a rational decision as much as a unconscious pull. Because if you rationally thought through it, you'd say, well, why would I vote for this person who's going to make my life worse? But it's more of an unconscious motivation, which is much more powerful usually than a rational one with that.
Is there an archetype that you can point to that?
There indeed is. I'm not going to give it away, but there is an archetype, and I've got two images, unless I took them out of the slide deck. But yeah, absolutely. When we talk about the Trump complex, we'll talk about the archetype that we see underneath it. We just showed.
And is there a myth? is there a myth that goes with those archetypes?
Absolutely, there must be, and you can look at it in different ways. But yeah, I'm going to postpone that question until we get to the archetypes. But I want to spend a good 10 minutes on the Trump complex and the underlying archetype, within that. Right. Yeah, because that was within that chapter as well. We really tried to explore that very piece. Anyone else whose microphones are open? Yeah, some are self-muted. So
yes.
Go ahead, tell me your name and where you're at.
My name is Ruth, and I'm in Andover, Massachusetts.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for what you're doing. I'm thinking about the same question, and what's been coming to my mind is that in our country there is training almost from birth that there's an answer and that there's somebody in charge, and it's a religious situation. And I would be interested in your comments on that, because I think we're trained from birth to be conned.
Trained from birth. Can you tell me a little more what you're thinking about that when you say we're trained from birth to be conned?
Well, I guess I would have to go to my personal experience, which is that I was brought up by fundamentalists. And I'm thinking along those lines. I'm thinking that there's training right from the beginning.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on. We're publishing a book called Dark Religion that's taken us longer than we anticipated to get through the publishing process. But it looks at fundamentalism and the dark aspects of that. And obviously we're not just saying Christian fundamentalism. There's every faith has fundamentalist sects to it. And fundamentalism, I completely agree with you, is fertile ground for a Trump complex or a Donald Trump to come in and reap the harvest, good or bad, from that. Because if you're in a fundamentalist perspective, have been trained in that and hear that from the pulpit, every week, those are very simplistic answers. If you just believe this one doctrine, or just do this one thing, or just say this one prayer of salvation, then life will be good, you will get this, or the prosperity gospel, you'll be rich and things will go well. But yeah, I think you're very much on target. That fundamentalism, which pulls us towards simplistic answers, would make a Donald Trump, a very appealing, candidate. And when we talk about the Trump complex, fundamentalism rolls right into that. That makes fertile ground for that complex to run, rampant with that. Yeah, absolutely. Well said.
The other thing that just came to mind was that he did say quite recently, "I am not president of the world." And of course, since almost everything he says is a lie, I'm I'm thoroughly convinced that he actually thinks he's the president of the world.
And so America First.
Pardon?
Yeah. Well, the whole piece of America First, Make America Great Again, our first talk that we did that's still posted online, we talked a fair amount about that. Tom Singer's chapter looked at the statements from the Trump campaign and what underlies some of that, the simplicity and tapping into that Trump complex, in essence, that pulls that forward. But America First, which is sort of absurd, it means that every other country should be second, third, and fourth, and we should be preeminent in the world. I guess that's great if you're from the United States, but if you're from other parts of the Americas or the globe, it doesn't feel so good. And Make America Great Again, a simplistic response of, we can have nostalgic good old days like the 1950s when we seem to be in charge of the planet. But you do wonder, is there a sense of trying to get us back to the 1950s, particularly or earlier when we had the atom bomb, Russia didn't yet, or even the early days where our companies were pretty much sort of running the globe. But yes. Any other question before we close the mic?
Yes, this is Jonathan Paul down in Texas here. You seem to be headed in the direction of the question, how does this whole phenomena reflect on the character of the American culture? Our exceptionalism. I mean, Trump, yes, he has catalyzed something. I mean, it has really, put people on a buzz. But what is the deeper reflection? And I think you'll probably get into that when you get into the archetypal and the mythological nature of the American character. So I'm hoping.
Let me ask you, do you have a thought about that? What do you think is the underlying piece of that?
Well, I think there's probably some other lies going on, not only Trump's lies, but I think there has been some deception in terms of the collective culture for quite a few years. I don't know, I don't want to get into the UFO stuff, but there is that whole area of disclosure and unacknowledged and things which have to do with different realms. Are we alone? It gets into a larger, wider view that, say, Danny Sheehan, people may know that attorney Danny Sheehan, who has done some investigations on that. So I think it's catalyzing something, a deeper distrust in the whole, the presentation of, the recent presentation the last couple of decades of our culture, which has been more showbiz and entertainment, I think, than reflective. But I don't. Yeah.
Absolutely. Many of the authors try to explore that phenomenon of the book that we wrote really isn't about Donald Trump. It isn't. It's about narcissism in the era of Donald Trump, meaning that we try to take a wide view of narcissism itself and what is going on in our country that allows this phenomenon. So
yeah. I haven't read the book, so I'm sorry, but I will now. But
it's a much bigger issue. It's not just Trump.
Yeah.
Trump has taken advantage of this phenomenon, but it's much more. Let me move forward just so we keep aware of the time. We'll mute the microphones. Just muted everybody. So let's go forward with the presentation. But thank you for the questions. Yeah, outstanding. By the way, 92% feel he's a con man. So that's a pretty sweeping thought with that. Okay. And take down that poll if you haven't yet, Ryan, and we'll go forward with the slides. So again, this next slide is saying that ultimately it's the readers or the viewers' decision. There's no, I guess, absolute litmus test, but are we concerned enough that we're being conned, that the world is being conned? And if so, how do we respond to that? In other words, all of these take inner work. We need to look inside, both how we are pulled into that, but also what is our response if indeed we believe this is to be the case. Next section is post-Trump-matic stress disorder that initially, I came up with sort of in tongue-in-cheek, sort of out of jest. But the more I sat with it, the more I saw it as a bona fide phenomenon. Maybe not a clear DSM-5 diagnosis, but as a psychiatrist, I work with patients day in and day out. That's my main job. 5 days a week, I sit in this office listening to patients. And I can't tell you how many times leading up to the election and even more after the election, the amount of stress, anxiety, and depression I was hearing in people's lives. And I've been practicing nearly 30 years. So I've been through a lot of presidential elections and never have seen anything to that effect. Some, a little bit, but nowhere near, which got me thinking along the lines of post-Trump-matic stress disorder, PTSD. The thoughts behind that, November 8th, of course, was so unanticipated. We were all almost guaranteed that Hillary Clinton was going to win. We just didn't know how much she was going to win by and how much of the Congress she would take. There were a handful of people saying otherwise, but almost all the political pollsters were heavily convinced that she was going to win, which meant her defeat and Trump's victory that much more kind of shocking and potentially traumatic. We've been seeing anxiety, fear, despair, even paranoia, delusional level, paranoia with catastrophic assumptions, since the election. PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, we're defining as a heightened anxiety, uncertainty about the future, fear, and even depression as sufferers focus on perceived catastrophic results emerging from President Trump's term in office. I want to start this section by talking about bullies and abusers. All of us, I would venture, have either been bullied we've been bullies, or we've seen somebody close to us bullied. And same thing with abuse, sexual or physical abuse. We've been abused, we've been the abuser, or somebody close in our inner circle have been abused. For men, a lot of time it's the bullying piece. Myself growing up, and I would venture every man and women as well, but boys on the playground bully, and they bully a lot. And I can remember, like it was yesterday, events on the playgrounds, with that. Bullying is archetypal and it is built into the fabric. Schools are trying to have zero tolerance. Of course, that's only marginally successful, but that is a nearly universal phenomenon. And unfortunately, abuse, physical or sexual, is as well. Victims of sexual abuse, many women, and of course men as well, have been sexually abused, or we know somebody close to us have been abused. It's the rare person that hasn't been abused and knows nobody in their life that's been through that, unless they're a hermit and living in a detached manner. The 2005 Access Hollywood tape, where Donald Trump boasts of groping women without their consent, was unbelievable to most of us. And then to watch him suffer virtually no adverse effects, politically, from this, led to even more shock and dismay. So to see him win the presidency, weeks after being caught boasting, on a prior tape, about, what appears to be sexual abuse, was very triggering for a lot of people. Many of my patients developed flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety as they recalled their own abuse, and as the now victorious president had recently bragged about abusive behavior. I even had a number of patients that this triggered suicidal thoughts. Not that President Trump was the only reason behind the suicidality, but that was a factor that brought them into a very dangerous space. Post-traumatic stress disorder and immigration, his anti-immigrant campaign messages and subsequent executive orders have left large numbers of Americans, of U.S. People feeling unwelcomed and targeted. Many immigrants and Muslims fear reprisal and persecution. There's a heightened sense of anxiety, fear, and depression in the immigrant population. PTSD and catastrophic thinking, those people I've seen that have been most suffering from this are often caught in these catastrophic thoughts. We will be caught in a global nuclear war. The environment will collapse within 4 years. Democracy as we know it is over. We will be, or are in soon, a totalitarian regime. And while any of those are certainly possible, the catastrophic nature of the thought has almost a certainty to it of this is happening and I've got to build a bomb shelter or move to Canada or somehow flee from that. And these people are genuine, many of them, as they say this. So poll question, and then we'll open up the microphones. Do I see the concept of post-Trump-matic stress disorder as a silly, inappropriate construct that waters down the true diagnosis of PTSD? Or is it valid, describing some of the trauma post-election, or are we unsure, or none of the above? So as you're answering that, raise your hand if you would like a microphone opportunity, and I will open them up. I'll start from the Z's and move my way up, just to be fair to folks.
Hi, it's Ruth again.
Hi, Ruth.
Hi, I'm a dual citizen. UK. United Kingdom.
United Kingdom. Mm-hmm.
And I voted to remain. So as soon as I saw what happened and I saw that Farage and Trump were cozying up to each other, I knew what was going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure I have a question, except that I can say that all those reasons that you said that you were observing in your clients, I've observed in myself.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, sometimes mildly so, and some of us, extremely, so. Let me ask you, were you tempted to move back to move to the UK, or was
it? I had an intention to at least buy again, because I had sold in 2011. So I thought, I'm going to do what I had planned to do, but I'm going to do it slowly. I'm not going to immediately run away.
Right.
And I'm not selling here either. So I'm keeping both. But the feeling that, but I had to work really hard to not feel that I was fleeing.
Yeah.
And I have because I live next to a community that is very, very highly immigrant. So there's a great deal of fear here.
Yeah, likewise. We have a very strong immigrant community here, and I've been involved, in the Catholic Church, where there's a large Latino population, and the fear is striking. It is absolutely overwhelming to many of them. The fear that they'll be rounded up and deported in these mass deportations is palpable with that. They're hiding in their homes. They're not going out in public as much. It's sad, and they're suffering from the elections, significant anxiety.
We have also LGBTQ people, very, very dear to us. Many of my friends do as well, and we are fearful for them now in ways that we weren't before.
Exactly.
But I would like to think about post-traumatic growth. That's where my brain is going, and I'm working on that concept professionally, and also thinking of it in terms of the social order. How are we going to grow out of this situation? What's the good that's going to come of it? Maybe you'll talk about that later.
Yeah, if we can, we'd like to. I think I've just shared. Can people see the poll results? Is that through there? Okay.
Yeah, you and I both clicked it at the same time, it looked like.
Okay, I hope I didn't unclick it or mess it up. Maybe one more question before we move on, being aware of time. Anybody else have a thought of post-traumatic stress disorder? There should be some microphones still open.
I think my microphone is open. Is that true?
Yes, it is indeed. Yeah. Who is this?
This is Teresa from Dayton, Ohio. It's nice to find out you were up here for your training.
Indeed. I love Dayton. I was there 4 years. Really enjoyed. I lived in Beaver Creek.
Oh, that's great. What is going on? It was going on during the campaign and continues to go on for my husband and me, is the complicity that the GOP showed during the campaign, and even now with senators supporting the awful cabinet choices and the looking the other way during the campaign when he was really acting out, but letting him just go forward. And it just feels like it isn't just Trump's problems that are spilling over. It's the support, the enabling that he is getting from the GOP in general, which makes the abuse continue, and feel like maybe thinking that we would get some control back, but they seem to block the controls that we might exert. So I just want to just say that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Teresa. There's almost a mob mentality that takes over, that we're saying it's suddenly okay to be prejudiced, to be attacking of others, to scapegoat people, and you really get the sense that numerous groups are tagging on, almost on coattails, with President Trump and using it as an agenda to expand the abuse in other ways. LGBT community. I'm in North Carolina, where we've had this bathroom bill fight for the last 6+ months, and it's obscene what's happening in many areas across the country. But you're right. I think it expands. It's not just the trauma of just President Trump. It then expands into cabinet choices, into EPA, into Planned Parenthood, into attacks on scapegoated groups. It goes. One more.
And Nunes with the House investigation, interfering with it. trying to prevent it from moving forward as the chair of that committee. It feels like something very sinister is involved. I just can't help but feel like something sinister is there.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah, it definitely feels that way.
yeah.
Well, let's go forward. But thank you so much, Teresa. I really, really appreciate that. Okay, we're going to mute the microphones. I think we're muted, so there shouldn't be any feedback. And let's move forward. And I think hopefully we've closed that poll. Yeah. Okay, so next section is something we're calling a shadow presidency. You know, then the new edition of the book, we spent some time looking at a concept of a shadow president. And let me show some slides of what I was thinking along those lines. What struck me most, I don't know about most, there's so many things that strike one in this election and presidency, but one thing is that Donald Trump seems to embody the opposite of what you'd expect in a president. He's unconventional, unpredictable, non-political. This is his first political office. His family resides in Trump Tower, New York City, instead of the White House. For his pre-inaugural days, he was in New York more than Washington. And you virtually see a mirror image of what most of us define as presidential, you know, with that. Most presidents work hard to look the role of president. They try to act presidential. The way they dress, the way they speak, their ethics, their statesmanship, etc. They want to be seen as truthful, ethical, consistent. It is generally felt that the more presidential they appear, the more effective they will be in their role. I'm not saying President Trump doesn't do any of this. I mean, he's dressing in the suit and the tie and whatnot. But in many of these ways, it seems like he's almost drawn to the opposite, to the unpresident with that. So if those other pieces are in the expected roles of the president, what it means to be presidential, the question then arises, what's in the shadow of the typical presidential persona? The unwanted elements of the presidential persona then would be displaced to the shadow. The presidential shadow would contain deceitfulness, half-truths, inconsistencies, unpredictability, unethical behavior, conflicts of interest, and instability. A shadow president we're defining as a president who embodies the characteristic opposites of the typical presidential persona. There's almost this sense of the bad boy president, that in quotes, sort of the president on a Harley Davidson motorcycle with a black leather jacket that's thumbing his nose at the rules, that's going against the current, who tries to be unpredictable, would be prone to counterattacks, who might go against typical U.S. doctrine and previous commitments because he's the bad boy, the president, the shadow presidency. Thus, Donald Trump embodies many aspects of the shadow president. And this could be good or bad. It's tempting to label it as all bad, but I was trying to scratch my head of, are there positive aspects to this? And I'm not saying the positives of President Trump himself, although you could look at it that way. But if you're a shadow president, if you're in a shadow presidency, what are the good and the bad elements of that? Helpful and unhelpful might be better than good or bad. At home, a good piece could be perhaps you can break through rigid constructs, unmovable in traditional administrations. You may be able to break through tax codes in good or bad ways, and entitlements and safety nets. And most of those would be probably bad. But my point with that is you might have leverage to break open systems that you wouldn't have before. And one would hope that there might be some positive things that could be broken apart. The bad is more numerous, but if you're a shadow unpresident, it's very easy to trigger anger, mistrust, and have people extraordinarily fearful of the instabilities there. Abroad, it's maybe a little bit easier to see the potential positives of this shadow presidency, even though the bad is along this as well. The positives I could try to piece together were that if you're a sort of a bad boy, shadow president, you may have a better negotiation stance as countries fear an unpredictable U.S. response. And as scary as what's happening in North Korea, there's a sliver of optimism in me that, perhaps this president, could bully the North Koreans into behaving, better. Now, that's not my preferred way of international diplomacy, but you almost get the sense that the traditional U.S. president has never been able to get North Korea to play ball, and Russia as well. There's a possibility that a shadow president may have more leverage in some ways. The negatives of that are much easier to see. Traditional allies are clearly unnerved at the current administration because this unpredictability is very difficult for allies and allegiances, treaties, etc. There's a real fearfulness out there with that. Poll question, to what degree do I see President Trump as a shadow president? And in a moment, we'll open up for questions.
Hi, am I unmuted?
Yep, you're fine. Go ahead.
Okay, this is Tracy. I'm in Vancouver, BC.
Excellent. Hi, Tracy.
Hi, and I've listened to a few of your podcasts and stuff before. It's awesome. I just had a couple questions. It ties in with all of this. One of them being that long ago they had the book on the Sibling Society. I think it was M. Scott Peck. But is there a bit of that maybe he's come out of this idea that there isn't enough strong leadership skills present, and the perception of the shadow president who makes himself look the rebel, like you say, the motorcycle, and the people who are following him, looking for this strong leader, and then piggybacking on that, so many of these people themselves have possibly been abused or bullied, yet they're still supporting him. I just wondered if you might speak to that.
Yeah, and I think you're very right. And I keep promising to talk about the Trump complex, and I will shortly. I think it's the next section. But yeah, that is our theory in the chapter on the Trump complex of looking for the strong leader. That there is a deep, mostly unconscious desire in the United States and perhaps the world, that hungers for the strong leader, the daddy that'll just come up and show you how it is and slap around those congressmen to behave and fix the deficit and fix those countries that aren't behaving as well. I think that's a very strong dynamic. M. Scott Peck, I wasn't aware of that book. Can you tell me his main?
I'm pretty sure it's called The Sibling Society, and it was written quite some time ago. Mm-hmm. It mainly just focused on the lack of leadership and that, kind of more of it being a boys' club that weren't quite grown up enough, but sort of propping each other up. But, I can't speak to it very clearly at this stage.
Yeah, no, but that makes sense. I could certainly see that element. Yeah, but I think you're right on that desire for that easy solution and a strong leader is there.
And then the piece of so many people that I have seen, the contra side, the people who still support him, who literally have gone through, abuse or bullying or that sort of thing in their own life. And it's almost like, again, like seeking out the aggressor or, that's the comfort zone.
Yeah, almost a repetition compulsion.
Yes.
Yeah, that those that have been through, bullying or in fundamentalist religions, as you mentioned before, which has some bullying as well, could be a tendency to seek that out in a leader as well. Very common, those that have been traumatized find themselves drawn towards re-traumatization in some ways, not at all to blame the victim of trauma, but there's this repetition, trying to figure it out energy that can be within the psyche that can pull people into a re-traumatization. Yeah.
Right. Thank you.
One last question. Anyone else before we close the microphones?
Yeah, I'd like to ask a question.
Yeah, go ahead. What's your name?
It's Vince Ward. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay, welcome, Vince.
Home of the shadow ambassador to the UN who used to be our governor.
Ah, okay.
I have had this thought for a while that I'm thinking about the fact that each of us has a dark side, an interior Darth Vader, if you follow Star Wars.
Yep, absolutely.
that is triggered by fear.
Mm-hmm.
And it's my perception that a lot of the people who responded to Trump were triggered by fear,
Mm-hmm.
projected their own inner Darth Vaders onto Trump, who then acted it out. Yep. And legitimized it. Mm-hmm. And I think something similar actually happened to the rest of us, the good guys, the liberals and the Democrats, who are now afraid of Trump and mm-hmm. reacting with pretty strong hate and anger and resentment and bitterness and so on towards Trump and his minions. Not that they don't deserve it.
What is also projection, that you project either way, that the fair progressives that are angry and fearful and protesting may, myself included, be projecting our inner fears and shadow onto President Trump even more than he deserves. He certainly deserves some of that. But projection, I think you're exactly on target, is a big piece of what's going on. And you're foreshadowing our last section, which is confronting our narcissism within, of what can I do about this? I need to be active politically. I need to speak out. I need to hold webinars maybe. But I also need to confront the narcissist within. A big piece of the book is about what to do about our own narcissism. It's not just pointing the finger at Trump and saying, hey, you're narcissistic, your presidency is illegitimate or bad. There may be a lot of things we're highly concerned about his presidency, but can we confront the narcissist within? How do I mirror that? How do I project my own shadow and negative images onto scapegoated groups, perhaps, which we see in the presidency a fair amount, or onto the president himself? I think it's spot on.
Yeah, I think that, excuse me, that the issue is consciousness. I would rather be more conscious of my own inner Darth Vader taking shape and taking it out on other people than not be aware of what's going on. I'll make a clearer choice about things when I get the chance, if I'm conscious.
Exactly. And the other piece of this is it's also a call to grow within ourselves, and how do I project onto others? How do I deal or not deal with my shadow within or my narcissist within? Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much. Well, good. Let's move on. We got 20 minutes left if we go to the max 90 minutes. And let me keep going with the slides. Okay. All right. So I promised the Trump complex, and here it is. Again, this is from the first edition. Of course, it's in the second edition of the book as well. But we try to walk through the idea of personal complexes and collective, unconscious complexes. Complexes are charged sets of feelings that are charged around a particular issue. They are unconscious, unless we grow, through therapy or other ways to make them conscious. But they are mostly unconscious. They often stem from a trauma or a difficult experience earlier. And when these personal complexes are triggered, we behave in unusual or destructive ways. Many of us have heard of common examples. We might have a warrior complex, a mother complex, an inferiority complex, a hero complex, a Peter Pan complex. And all that means is that whatever that complex is within me, it's an unconscious aspect of my personality that under the right circumstances comes forth and usually gets me in trouble with something. If I'm a Peter Pan complex, I might be irresponsible, not productive, not growing up. If I'm caught in a warrior complex, I might be aggressively attacking people, maybe not physically, but through the business world, and tripping up through that. Stress can often trigger and put us into a complex. And if it becomes extreme, it's as if we're possessed by that complex. And we filter everything solely through that lens. The other aspect of this is, just as people have complexes, entire nations or groups can have complexes. And that's the idea of cultural complex, really written quite a bit about by Thomas Singer, a psychiatrist out in California, San Francisco area. And Tom Singer has a chapter, of course, in the book, and really talks a lot about the idea of cultural complex. These are unconscious, hidden, and lead to unusual group behaviors. And again, they cluster around very charged emotions. As we were putting together that chapter, we started to think through what are the national wounds that we've been through. Of course, the Twin Towers, 9/11, 2001, a huge national wound for us. The subsequent 15 years, I guess 16 now, of war in various parts of the Mideast. Terrorism, initially the Taliban, then Al-Qaeda, and now ISIS. Of course, the 2008 financial collapse, that was a huge trauma. Many people lost their homes, their livelihoods. Or you can even go farther back than 15, 20 years. You can go back 50 years to the Vietnam War. That era, that was highly traumatic for our country. And in each of these areas, there's been an erosion of sorts of U.S. dominance on the world stage. Back in the 50s, there was a almost Camelot era with the U.S. Being dominant through the world. And this has eroded, for right or for wrong, over the 50 years. There's more of a feeling of national powerlessness to foreign wars and to terrorists. There's the loss financially of the American dream. And there's this national fear that seems to be growing. We theorize that this national unconscious complex could draw people towards a simplistic image of strength and nostalgia. Strength, somebody who had a Herculean ability to build walls, to get Mexico to pay for the walls, to keep the bad hombres out, and to always win. You will get sick of winning. We're going to win until you say, Mr. Trump, no more winning. And then nostalgia to the good old days. Let's make America great again. Let's get it back to the 1950s Camelot, plastic era when America seemed to be on top. So the theory is that Donald Trump was able to tap into this fear-based, unconscious national complex and draw large segments of the population to him in very irrational ways. When you would think through what their best interest would be, it wouldn't be necessarily to vote for him, but unconsciously they were pulled into it. We'll do the poll, but I'm going to skip the questions to the very end, only because we're close to the end. And I'm going to get to the archetype. I didn't include that slide, but it's in the slide deck, so I'm going to skip to that soon. There is, we're theorizing, an unconscious piece under this. The slide deck I was looking for, which I've deleted but have elsewhere on my computer, which I won't go for, was John Wayne. That you could take any archetype, but as we were theorizing it, John Wayne or General Patton, both have these archetypal energies around them that the Trump complex we feel like was tapping into, with that simplistic John Wayne energy of, I know the bad guys, they wear black hats, I wear a white hat, I can pull my gun out quickly and know who to shoot at and won't hesitate to pull the trigger, is a image of strength and nostalgia that has been embodied in the United States in the image of John Wayne. General Patton, same piece, and the image I had of that was Patton in front of the American flag from the beginning of the movie Patton, which again is very simplistic. We're going to find the enemy, we're going to kick him in the butt, and we're going to get him out of Europe. Both of those American icons are of a simplistic, strong, nostalgic hero archetype that somehow President Trump, we believe, has tapped into unconsciously and brought that forward. So the last section, which we touched on already a little bit, but we'll spend a tad more time and then get some final questions as we conclude, is confronting our own narcissism. So President Trump isn't the only narcissist in our lives. We have arrogance, we deny our own narcissism, and how do I embody these traits? So a larger really part of the book looks about that. What is the myth of Narcissus? We haven't talked about that at all today, but Narcissus and Echo and some of the underlying mythology of that. and how narcissism and our own struggles with that come forth. There's a chapter on living with a narcissist. Nancy Ferlati talks about what it was like for her to be married to a narcissist and how that affected pieces. And we look a lot at social media and the focus on selfies and me and what I want, which our current generation and culture is really tapped into. This book, I have to disclose, is a Chiron book, so it's a little self-serving to bring that forward. But it's a marvelous book. It's a very thin book. It takes you less than an afternoon to read. But Robert Johnson, if any of you have read him, does such a good job at describing inner realities from a Jungian perspective. And his whole point in this book is about inner gold. We give away our inner gold to others. That may be through hero worship, through mentors in our lives. We give them our inner gold when we idealize, or we give them our inner sludge. And that's not a Robert Johnson term. That was my own thought of, if we give good projections of inner gold to people we admire, we give negative projections of inner sludge to those that we dislike. And whether you love or hate Donald Trump, there's very few people in the middle. You love him or you hate him. What is that saying about us? So what is underlying that projection if we are trapped in a dark projection towards him or a light, a gold one with that? Some of that is based on reality, of course, but some of that is our own, either scapegoating or projection of positive or negative onto him. This is my final slide for this presentation, at least, which is, what can I do? Most important is exploring our tendencies towards narcissism. Before we take the log out of Donald Trump's eye, before we take the speck out of Donald Trump's eye, or log, it could be both, can we take the log out of our own eye? Meaning we've got to deal with our own narcissism as we hopefully confront exterior narcissism as well. Again, I can't talk in an hour and a half too much about that, but personal analysis, our book, other books talk quite a bit about that. Of course, we shouldn't ignore the political process. We need to engage, we need to vote, we need to work for candidates that we feel reflect our views better. If you'd like, spread the word of today's talk. We feel this is a very important message. We think this is a vital message that needs to get out there. So if those watching wouldn't mind sharing the link, we'll have a link to the recorded version of this talk. Spread the link. Anybody who's interested in learning about inner narcissism or exterior narcissism, send them the link once it's posted on YouTube. We'll post this video, no charge, on YouTube. Share that with friends, family, others. Ask them to share it. We would love the word of this process to get out there. Our website is Trump-narcissism.com. It's got the book. It's got the press kit. If you go to it and click on media, you can download a 15-page press kit that's got summaries of the book. It's got authors. It's got quotes from the book. And it's got links that you can click on the PDF, and it'll jump you to the 20 or so interviews we've done, which goes into a lot more detail. We've had some really outstanding interviewers who have asked some very penetrating questions and put out some good views. And of course, we have a Facebook page, as everybody has a Facebook page. So I don't have a clock. I have to look at my watch. 10 minutes. We have 9 or 10 minutes left. So that concludes our presentation today. We do have 2 or 3 other seminars we've done earlier, all of which are free, talking about this issue. One was based out of Zurich, Switzerland, that had a number of presenters, talking about pre-election, what they thought was going on. There's another one that was California and Zurich based. And then I did another talk where I really, you saw the slides briefly as I flipped through them, really dove more into specific quotes from Donald Trump, looking a little bit more at narcissistic personality disorder. If you liked today's talk, feel free to look at the others, and please spread the free links to others with that as well. So in the last few minutes, please click your raise your hand button, and we will entertain any closing thoughts, comments. So Professor Jonathan, whoops, you're self-muted, so I can't unmute you.
Okay, there I am.
Oh, there you are. You mute yourself. Go ahead if you have a comment. Mute others.
Yeah, this has been very good. It's brought a lot of things together. What seems to be key here is the sense of the other. Who is the other? He has really facilitated or catalyzed the sense of otherness. And the question is, how deep do we go? How far back do we go to this sense of the otherness? I mean,
right.
And what are all the different shadows and the nuances of this otherness? You know, on a national level and especially on a cultural level, which also ties into the American exceptionalism. I think, you know, we need to go back 50, 100, you know, even pre-Bill of Rights or Constitution to look at the American experiment and what in terms of the natives and the other. I mean, there's a lot that could cause us to reflect back. That's my kind of first question. The second question would be, what would Philemon have to say to Trump?
What would Philemon have to say to Trump? I like that. Well, as a good psychiatrist, let me reflect it back to you. What do you think Philemon would say to Trump?
I don't know. I mean, he'd be, would he say, come fly with me? I don't know what he would, I'd have to, well, I think it would be very, very interesting that we should actually ask Trump for his dreams. Wow. I think there's no reason why the dream story, I mean, 24/7, rather than when he's twittering, I would say, would you please, you know, reflect on, catch some of your imagery, and we would be happy to, you know, keep that contained within, but I don't see why not. I mean, Lincoln shared his dreams.
Is that interesting? Right.
Yeah,
right.
I think.
And he probably shared it in tax returns also.
Yeah, yeah. Roosevelt did. So, I mean, I think we could.
It was a marvelous thought. It's hard to imagine, him disclosing much of anything. But yeah, if you had an Obama or a Hillary, or any kind of progressively oriented, wouldn't that be neat if presidents actually shared their dreams and had that as the open piece? And others did as well, not just the president, but people.
His consulting circle. I think that's.
You want Trump in a dream group. You want him to be in a dream group. We'll add that.
More of a nightmare group than a dream.
Let me comment quickly on the other, because you're right on with that. This is all about the other and scapegoating the other and the dangerous immigrant and the bad radical Muslims and you know, the other non-America, because America needs to be first. It's really all about projecting shadow onto the other, which really goes to Cain and Abel, if you're biblical or whatever myth, if you go farther back. But Cain and Abel, projected a murderous rage on the other and killed him. This goes all the way back. We did a book on Jacob and Esau from Neumann. Eric Neumann, he uncovered a manuscript buried in the bowels of a psychiatric hospital, and it was Eric Neumann and Micah Neumann, Eric Neumann's son, revived it, edited it, and brought it to us. And it's the brother motif. It's about Jacob and Esau. And when you go through, the Christian stories, from Cain and Abel, Jacob and Esau, Isaac and whoever, but there's this long archetypal, lasting energy of attacking the other. That the brothers, of course, could be sisters, but the brothers attacking one another goes all the way back. And I think almost any mythology you look at, you'll find powerful attacks towards the other with that.
I'm taking that Neumann. That's a very good seminar. I enjoy those.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, they're doing a marvelous job. Arel Shalit, when he's able to join us, Murray and the others have done such a good job with that. Yeah, thank you so much. Any other questions? We got 3 minutes left before I need to leave, because I've got a patient waiting outside my office. Other questions from any microphones unmuted or comments?
This is Ruth again.
Yeah, hi Ruth.
Hi. Next time you talk about national wounds, can you please mention slavery?
Absolutely. It depends how far you go back. We went back 15 years initially, and then
mass incarceration?
Right. The wounds are almost unlimited, but you're exactly right. You could go back farther in time or deeper now. The wounds can go on and on and on. And slavery, absolutely, a huge wound. The incarcerations, and remember, all of those about the other. It's about how we mistreat the other, how we incarcerate the other, how we enslave the other, how we go to war to the other. That wasn't meant to be an all-inclusive list of trauma. The trauma is virtually endless with that.
Thank you.
Good. I want to thank everybody again. We've had some marvelous questions, comments. I've really enjoyed hosting this and hearing in a participatory fashion. I'm delighted that we were able to open the microphones and have some dialogue back and forth and still get through the slides as well. Please do share this if you have anybody interested. I am passionate about spreading the word about narcissism and going within with that. Any group that's got over, let's say, double digits, 10 or more people in a group who wants a Skype-oriented talk like this, if I'm able, I'm willing to engage with your groups, and we can keep this dialogue going. We do have the Neumann conference continuing. That was a nice plug by the last listener. That continues next Thursday, I believe, Thursday of next week. And anybody who wants to join us in the Neumann conference can get caught up, because they're all on recorded versions. Then you can join us for the live one or the recorded next conference as well. So feel free to do so. With that, we will sign off, and hopefully we will host another one of these down the road. Take care. Bye-bye.